Hi, nobody. I've been kind of busy this past couple of weeks, so that's why last week there wasn't a video, and this is why this week's video is a bit more improvised than normal. Um, I don't think anybody will notice, but that's fine. So I wanted to talk about kind of my experience with the metal community as a whole, and it's I've got I have mixed feelings about it. It's both really nice and really horrible. It can get really exhausting and quite intolerable, actually. I grew up um, listening to metal. Actually, I wasn't a metalhead, though. I kind of never fully embraced anything culturally in any of the styles of music that I listened to, and I listened to quite a bit, not as much as I do now, but I used to listen to a lot of traditional folk music from various parts of the world, um, a lot, a lot of hard rock and metal, ska. I used to be a lot into ska. I still like ska, but I'm not as into it. A lot of electronic music, New Orleans jazz, um, you know, classical music, a lot of classical music actually. Um, and that kind of shaped how I perceived music and cultures around music. I never fully developed an attachment to any of them, but and at the same time I had a lot of love and respect for many of them. So it was kind of a there's too many things to actually choose one. So I kind of wandered around a lot in that regard. I kind of shifted. Through the years, I got a lot more into punk and metal specifically, and from there, I kind of developed my aesthetics. I used to have a mohawk actually, but I didn't fully embrace being a punk by definition. That's the closest I've ever been to something, and part of the reason is for that is that I wasn't in contact with an actual metalhead community for years. I wasn't in contact with pretty much any common scene. There's lots of noise out there. I where I used to live, where my parents live actually. We had kind of a mixed thing, and it was an alternative scene, but it wasn't metalheads or goths or emo or punks. It was kind of a mixed bag of everything. Pretty much everyone liked metal and punk and ska and a lot of hip hop actually. um, some electronic music, especially gabber and psytrance and things like that, rave music. Um, a lot of emo music actually, modern emo music, classic emo music, something I had to discover a lot later. But we had the same people listening to um, My Chemical Romance, Foo Fighters, and uh, Cannibal Corpse, Suicide Silence, um, Scape, which is a pretty big Spanish ska punk band. We were all on the same place, listening to the same things, and so I used to be in contact with a bit of a hybrid. That's something that kind of also helped to never, in my situation of never attaching to anything fully. I had too much going on in that regard. Through the years, I centered a lot a lot more into metal, even more than before. And since I was 11 years old, 10 or 11. When I was 10, I started listening to death metal. When I was 11, I started listening to black metal. And for a while, I pretty much only listened to extreme metal and uh, industrial metal and a bit of metalcore. And that's pretty much everything I listen to. Um, I would jump around every once in a while towards oi music and punk music, and maybe go back to electronic music for a while. Maybe some hip hop once or twice. I've always liked hip hop. I've never been well. From a certain point or onwards, I haven't been extremely into it. Um, and my taste kind of got stuck a bit. It expanded, but really slowly and into the same areas. So I got into harder metal, I got into harder punk music, I got into more depressing stuff. I got into depressive black metal at around 13 maybe, 12 or 13. And that kind of was the trend. I started listening to dark ambient through black metal actually. So everything was kind of extreme metal adjacent. And then somehow, when I was maybe 15, I got really lost again in that regard, in that kind of went all over the place once again. And finally, I got into experimental music. And I'm still jumping around all over the place. I listen to a lot of metal. I mostly listen to metal, but I also listen to a lot of experimental music, and I listen to a lot of punk music, and pretty much everything that I can, everything that I found that I enjoy, I consistently listen to it for long periods of time, and then stop listening to it and listen to something else, and I kind of go like this. Mostly it's black metal though. And I spent a lot of time talking about my upbringing, not so much. Well, at maybe um, around my age 11, I had my first computer for my own, and I started going more and more into the internet. I used it mostly to learn about music, history, mostly history. I forgot about music theory for years. So I studied music history through the internet and found more and more things and learned more, and that brought me towards the metal community there. So I had my first contact with the metal community through the internet, and I got pretty angry. I didn't like what I saw. I saw a lot of bitterness and a bunch of closed-minded people being angry with other people for not listening to the same things, or angry to other people for, despite listening to the same things, listening to other things, certain other things that they didn't like. Metalheads bashing each other for listening to things that they considered that were not true enough, or the actual thing, or metalheads just hating on other people and hating themselves, more like, well, not themselves, hating each other, and arguments everywhere, and not really well thought arguments most of the time. It was just like, well, it's like this because this sucks, or this is shit, or you are a faggot, and it was kind of a depressing discovery for me, that the community surrounding the music that I love was full of assholes and full of really homophobic people, especially. Um, I figured my fully figured out my sexuality at around the time I had a computer, a little earlier. So I found myself surrounded by people that hated me. Actually, I didn't talk to most of them. I haven't interacted directly with many people through the internet that I don't know, um, except specific situations. And you know, I saw that maybe I didn't have to talk to them. I didn't have to interact with them just because I like the same music as them, and because those these people that I saw hated me without knowing me. I hadn't talked to them, and I already knew they would hate me, because not only I listened to and identified with a lot of other music, but when someone is shouting out or writing in all caps homophobic slurs, and you are kind of a victim of that situation in your day-to-day life, it's an attack. It's still an attack, and it doesn't feel good. So you just step out of there. Things kind of got a bit worse when I found out about the Metal Archives. It's a site that I still use to this day. It's a really useful tool, but and it has relaxed since then and since they started. But I found out about that site around the last year or 2 years, that they had the term malcore, for example. So I found this really useful tool for me, because I really liked learning about new bands and finding out new things. And at that time I realized how many Nazis were in metal music, especially in black metal, and it's a really useful tool for that too. And you know, despite despite the Metal Archives being an amazing site for that, I saw myself as an as an outlier, and it became pretty obvious. And actually, I started to have situations with them, and some of them my fault, some of them their fault. My English level at the time might have been an issue at certain points because I didn't fully understand the things they said to me. So I had my information was kind of scattered in that regard. So maybe at some point I caused some of the things. But for example, one of the first issues I had is that when I tried to submit one of my first musical projects, one of my own, and it got rejected with the and they lied to me about that. And I'm still angry about it. I'm still really really angry, but they said it wasn't metal. And the first reasoning I ever got out of that, when I asked, okay, what's the issue with this project, which by the way is blacklisted, the answer I got was primarily keyboard/synths. At that time, I made music through programming, which is considered a sin for many people. That's one of the issues I have with the metal community. I wrote what I would essentially call a death metal variant, something really influenced by death metal, but I used programming. I used I DAW and MIDI. So I never actually used a guitar. I didn't know how to play guitar when I started. No, yeah, at that point I kind of know how to play guitar, but I couldn't record myself at all. I didn't have a bass. I didn't have a microphone. I had my guitar, I had an amp, and I had a computer. It was my only option to use MIDI at that time. And when I submitted it, the answer was primarily synth/keyboards, which later got deleted. But when I protested about that, and I was told that that was not the issue by the same person, and that the issue was that the riffs weren't metal enough, and that the sound quality wasn't good enough, which I thought it was bullshit. I did my best, and asking for sound quality for digital only projects when non-digital projects can submit the shittiest demos where you can't even hear the guitars. I thought it was bullshit. I still think it's bullshit. So that was my first moment of impact against the wall. And the fact that later I was lied to, and they tried to make me believe that that wasn't the answer that was given. I've searched for that, and I found I did a screenshot of of that just in case. So that was my direct issue. And then bands that used to be there that I thought that should be kept there started disappearing when they did their cleanup sessions. Bands that I thought should be there were not there already. So I saw it as a really closed-minded thing, the metalhead community, and getting into the metal YouTube, which I've grown apart from too. But at the same time, I saw, comedy and content in general directed towards my tastes. So I gravitated towards that, and I watched a lot of metal YouTube, and you know, I learned from that, and especially the comedy though received a lot of hate from the metalheads themselves. It blew my mind that some things that were obviously comedic and not actually trying to attack anyone, it was just poking fun at themselves, people poking fun at their own taste, still received a lot of hate. And that surprised me too. And I felt like it wasn't a welcoming community, as much as metalheads have a tendency to claim, and that everyone can enjoy metal, and you are not you're always welcome there. I've seen that. I've seen how it is. It's not true. There's a lot of gatekeeping, a lot. It's extreme the amount of gatekeeping that there is, and if you make a joke about it, a lot of people will jump at you. If you make an assumption, people will jump out at you. And later, especially as I got more politically inclined towards certain things, I saw that the metalhead community was extremely apologetic of certain patterns of behavior, of really intolerant behavior, and they were apologetic of that, but at the same time were attacking people who were on the opposite side of the spectrum. So I kind of saw and still see the metal community as a place of, really good things, but at the same time, it's not what it claims to be. It's not a free, open for everybody space where everyone can just enjoy music. It's not, it's really not. It's a hellhole of elitists and just really the biggest assholes I've ever had the displeasure of interacting with. So yeah, I got a bit angry at the end, but you know, kind of happens. But